For this video, it's going to be a multitude of figures. We're going to do Hot Rod, Blurr, Cup, Arcee, Ultra Magnus, and Springer. And that's going to be the peanut gallery today for the video. There probably won't be cuts back and forth of me doing this. I just wanted to do like the whole like, hey, this is the intro to my video. This is my collection. From time to time, like I will be making videos individually talking about certain figures. You want to hug with daddy? Yeah. Okay, hold on. As you can imagine, being a dad and having a kid in the room while trying to make a video, you're gonna hear some interruptions, and that's just how it is. I don't have a studio. I live here with my family, and unfortunately, I can't pretend that I don't. Again, you'll see my kid pop up. You probably hear my wife. You'll probably hear my older son every now and then. But today, I just wanted to make a video about like the main characters, or at least the Autobots that were newly introduced in Transformers the movie. They're all pretty important to me. I had Ultra Magnus as a kid, and again, before the internet existed, you couldn't see like, oh well, in Japan Optimus Prime got like a suit of armor or something like that, and he was Ultra whatever, or whatever they say in the wiki, like why Ultra Magnus was basically an albino Optimus Prime with an armor suit. In the 80s, that was never explained to anyone. It's not on the boxes. It's just like, this is the Ultra Magnus toy. And the toy did not work the same that Ultra Magnus did in the cartoon. That was a very disappointing toy for me. This new Ultra Magnus is amazing as far as that's concerned. The Hot Rod figure, awesome. The first figure, or the second figure I bought in this collection was Rodimus Prime from Power of the Primes, which is at the top of my rack. I do a little bit of comparative video between Hot Rods from the Power of the Primes and the Studio Series 86 one. And again, I just want to focus kind of like on the details of the figures, what I like about them. You know, I grew up in the 80s, so some of these toys, like besides Ultra Magnus and Galvatron, those were the only two movie figures I had. I've never seen Arcee, I've never seen Cup, I've never seen Hot Rod. I want to say that I've never seen, now that I'm thinking about it, I actually had Rodimus Prime, the Winnebago. But I've never seen a Hot Rod toy, was my point that I was trying to make. You know, that I have these characters now. I have Hot Rod, I have Cup, I have Blurr, I have Springer, who I also have never seen a toy of from G1. And I have an awesome Ultra Magnus. I've watched plenty of videos with other people like messing with Ultra Magnus, so when I got him, I just kind of put him on the shelf and was just like so happy that I had him, admiring like all the details, all the engineering that went into the figure. I like the details of the figure. I love the engineering of the figures, and that's really what I was trying to focus on saying. Just want to take this video to talk about it. This isn't like a review of the figures. This isn't like a how to transform the figures. There's plenty of other people that have done that over the last like 2 to 3 years while these figures were out. I feel like I would just be making a video doing more of the same, and I personally wouldn't sit through that. This collection started in 2022, a few months after I had my daughter. It was just kind of a way for me to have something to do and be present at home with my family instead of working on my little race car. That's it. I'll go ahead and stop the monologue now, and we'll get to the meat and potatoes of the video.
And speaking of meat and potatoes, Transformers Studio Series 86 12 Commander Ultra Magnus. This is a figure I was really surprised with as I began this collection. I had almost zero to low expectations this was an existing line and that the figures I acquired were a fluke. Being far removed from Transformers collecting, I didn't know why the Studio Series 86 line existed. I figured it was just a gimmick, such as the other things I see in Target every now and then, like Target Edition Optimus Prime and Transformers Lego sets. That said, when purchasing toys and hopping on the internet, I wasn't watching Hasbro Pulse streams or even going to forums to see what was released. I was just playing it by ear and collecting what I wanted. And when I looked into buying an Ultra Magnus figure to complete my little team of the new blood from the Transformers movie, all there was the Netflix Ultra Magnus that had the same gimmick I absolutely hated as a kid of the G1 toy. I get maybe for older collectors who are really stuck on G1 stuff, they would absolutely hate an Ultra Magnus toy that wasn't like the G1 figure, but for me, I literally have waited my whole life for an Ultra Magnus who was his own figure and not a soft launch replacement for Optimus Prime that came with an Optimus Prime figure. There's no chest compartment that holds his hands, there's no vanilla Optimus Prime figure, and the trailer is actually his body. With amazing detail, the chest chamber with the Matrix has to be one of the coolest aspects of this toy. And I mentioned in a prior video I was a huge Spawn nerd back in high school. Todd McFarlane McFarlane started his own toy company because he hated how action figures were just plastic statues. There was no articulation, and before they started making the toys they do now, McFarlane toys were overly detailed, stylized, and articulated like crazy. I'd say if the basis of his comic wasn't a superhero from hell, it would have been a lot more mainstream and popular, and because he's a big sports nut, he naturally transitioned into making sports collectibles too. But other companies who created and cheaped out and made plastic statues started making their toys not suck again. Hasbro's Transformers. Fast forward almost 20 years, and now everyone is just subletting their IPs to McFarlane. This toy reminds me so much of that. I'd argue with saying that this is one of the best Transformers Hasbro has ever made. I really cannot geek about this toy enough. Normally, the bigger the toy is, the less fun it is to play with. Perfect example is Fortress Maximus, but he is also 10 years old. I imagine if Hasbro wasn't trying to give up on toys and go full Ubisoft, they could release a new Metroplex and Fort Max that could rival this toy with this level of engineering and detail. I mean, this guy is a whole car carrier, 2 decks of cars, amazing articulation, posability, matrix chamber is amazingly detailed, spring-loaded, and flips open just like the cartoon, without me needing to get a set of tools or grow ungodly long fingernails to pick it open. Top-tier light piping, blast effects. For $90, I'd go as far as to say the designers took what they learned from MP22 Ultra Magnus and just took it to the next level. To even find a way to add removable legs and arms to replicate the scene where the Junkions put them back together again, G1 could never. Any other iteration of Ultra Magnus could never. I find a lot of people who are really into Transformers have this extreme hate for Hot Rod Rodimus Prime, but for me as a child, I just had beef with Ultra Magnus, especially because after they goofed and killed Optimus Prime off in the movie and Megatron, their sales tanked, so they pulled the classic comic book characters never really died trope and brought back Optimus Prime and Starscream and Megatron as a tank. So I had this Centurion Transformer, White Optimus Prime, power extremes himself into the included trailer to become Ultra Magnus. I cannot reiterate how much this toy is like therapy and healing for my childhood. Not only is this a magnificent toy in every aspect, it just commands respect next to anything on the shelf. Scale-wise, I think he's the perfect size. I don't see how this toy could have been smaller, and I don't see how this toy could have been bigger, and still makes sense in this line. He was the largest Autobot in the movie next to the Dinobots and, well, Unicron. Ultimately, I think Ultra Magnus was the right choice as a replacement for Optimus Prime, and there has always been this play on this trope through many series. Seeing him as the jazz to Optimus Prime for Rodimus Prime always felt off to me. Either way, before this becomes a full-blown love letter to Ultra Magnus finally getting his flowers, if there is any Studio Series toy that you should absolutely get your hands on, this is the one. I honestly would be surprised to see another toy like this come out in my lifetime, especially given the state of Hasbro. Studio Series 86-3 Deluxe Blurr.
You know, here in the streets of Boston, I've had people come up to me left and right since I've been here. Usually they do something like, or, you know, aren't you that guy? And so, you know, everyone thinks they're being very clever, but they all do one of 3 things. You know.
John Moschitta's claim to fame is that the Guinness Book lists him as the world's fastest talking man.
What about me, Magnus? What about me? I can help. I want to help. What about me?
Blurr, you can help me alert the others.
Absolutely, positively, definitely. Nobody can get the job done faster than I can. Nobody.
Come on, Arcee.
Blurr is a great character. The toy itself, I just want to state that for what it is, the mold, I mean, the weird elbows and stuff like that, I had to put nail enamel like in the wrist joint, elbow joint, knee joints to kind of tighten this figure up. Other than that, it's a great figure. Like, there's not a lot of parts forming. The alt mode is pretty much animation or screen accurate. Comes with a cool gun. It comes with a little tool. There's really not much to say about this figure. I just wanted to give, like, you know, a little quick props to John Moschitta because he was a big part of my childhood as well. Micro Machines took off right after Transformers started to kind of die out, and it became like one of their main competitors in the main scheme of all things. Hasbro ended up owning the company that originally made Micro Machines, from what I was reading. For some reason in my head, I felt like John Moschitta was the voice of Micro Machines first, and then was voicing Blurr, but apparently that was reversed, and he was doing the voice of Blurr, and then, you know, got the Micro Machines gig. Either way, great figure. I'm glad that, you know, he's part of the fold, and interestingly enough, he was one of the figures that came out first, and apparently Blurr has survived the G1 cast of Autobots and has made it into different forms of Transformers.
First of all, the name's not Zippy.
As a matter of fact, I don't believe I've ever met another bot named Zippy, so one can only assume that you came up with Zippy in reference to my speed, which may be technically accurate, but lacks a certain creativity.
I love that for him. I actually liked this character so much that I kind of stole. I mean, I never made my own comic, but I originally was drawing comics, and I have a character called Blurr, who is a speedster. The motivation for that character was basically this Transformer. Thankfully, I never became a comic book artist, so I didn't have to worry about getting sued. But I have like my drawings in my little cave of stuff.
Surprise, motherfucker.
Basically,
Studio Series 86-30 liter class Springer.
capable of propelling it to 300 knots. This jet chopper can disengage its
This is a
rotor system
toy,
and ignite
a
these two
character
additional
who is a
turbines.
mix
Airwolf can exceed
of
Mach 1 from
Airwolf,
sea level to 65,000 feet.
Blue Thunder, Conan, Rambo, and Ogre from the Nerds. This is a character I saw as a man's man, but also a bit of a bully. Again, my first impression of this character is from Transformers the movie in 1986. Not whatever comic book you read once you got super into Transformers. Not what Wikipedia said he is, what he was from any other iteration of Springer, because none of that stuff existed. Springer was the definition of on-site, as the kids would say. So many cartoons had the same writers, producers, distributors, that a lot of characters' personalities were fluid through different cartoons. G.I. Joe's Shipwreck was their Springer, only none of those folks turned into a badass jet helicopter rocket car. Funny enough, as this thought popped into my head, I just read Neil Ross voice them both. Forgive me, this finding has completely blown any plans for a script talking about Springer.
Now I know.
And knowing is half the battle.
He was a little bossy, super confident foot soldier. They packed all of his personality into a character that really only got fleshed out in the comic books. He's known as one of the leaders of the Autobot crew called the Wreckers, whom I've literally never heard of before.
Left in the tooling, and Hisui-san was like, what if we gave him like a wrecker hammer? I love it.
And that's a great part about collecting, is it really expands on the one-dimensional character I saw as a child. You appreciate things like that when you get older. Speaking of old, I know we said we weren't going to really get into all of the figure comparisons, and this has really been a hot topic of debate on if you should spend the $60 to get the Studio Series 86 Springer versus any other variation of him. I just so happened to buy Springer early when starting this collection. August 6, 2022 to be exact, for $51.45. WFC-S38. I know when he was announced, without even a second thought, I slapped that pre-order button. Mainly because my child lost one of the two swords and his guns, so I can't even form the helicopter blade anymore. But I like that he was more cartoon accurate. One thing I really disliked about the War for Cybertron figures was the rust, battle damage, deco. They give everything. Cool if you're in the Gunpla and you like weathering your figures. My brain wants what I saw on screen. Something about my SS86 Springer feels off. The way they redesigned his torso, he's got like super great posture now, even more so to go with that Machismo, Johnny Bravo vibe he gave off. But in doing so, they re-engineered the part his head sits on, so he literally cannot look up. So I just have the figures here to show the articulation you lose with the figure. And granted, he's more cartoon accurate, I feel this was a great time to re-engineer his weird Trax-esque feet. They couldn't have figured out a way to make a foldable boot-looking foot go up into that leg cavity and still make it work as a helicopter tail. I mean, Hasbro is always finding a way to ship out hollow plastic. I would have taken some Hot Rod ankles on Springer here to give him some proper feet. It's weird, I feel like he's either leaning too far back or towering forward with that backwards rotation of his upper torso. I still love the toy, I love the look, I love the helmet redesign, even the unnecessary arm cannon gimmick. What I don't love is him not being able to move his head, and the stupid Wrecker's hammer that cost me $600 in additional toys because I ended up getting Wrecker's FOMO. And no, before you ask, I'm not putting anything older than Titan's Return on this shelf.
Lord have mercy, I'm about to bust.
Speaking of the Wreckers, Cup here apparently stood in as the leader of that team for a bit. Since I don't want to act all brand new, let's stick to what I know. And that takes us to our next figure of the bunch, the grouchy old war hero, Studio Series 8602 Cup. Does anyone ever look at the numbering of some of these figures and ask yourself how the hell Jazz is the first character of this toy line and Cup the second? Weird. Anyway, Cup is the soft launch replacement for Brawn. I don't think we saw gears in a pile of bodies, so technically, as the writer said, if you didn't see them dead in the movie, they survived, so I'm going to stick with that and say he was the replacement for Brawn. The writing for Cup was really good. I was a bit disappointed not to see Cup as much in the cartoon following the movie. It seemed he just kind of drifted off in character limbo because Ultra Magnus was more of a fitting advisor to Rodimus Prime, and I'm sure Toys on the Shelf had a large part to do with this as well. As far as the figure goes, I enjoy the fact that they added the little gimmick where you can remove his limbs and have Hot Rod repair him and stuff like that. He comes with a little detonator. I'm guessing that's probably from the construction scene in the beginning of the movie. I'm not really sure what that's for. He comes with a gun. I really appreciate the engineering of the figure. He doesn't have a huge backpack. He kind of is what he is. It's unfortunate that they did such a good job with Cup as far as the engineering of his transformer, but Arcee has like a huge backpack. She's basically a car former or something like that. That said, I was just praising the fact that Springer was like jet, helicopter, rocket car type of thing, and Cup seemed to get like the crappiest alt modes on the planet. A Cybertronian El Camino, and Hot Rod it eventually becomes a supercar and then turns into a Winnebago. It's almost like a metaphor for growing up and getting rid of your race car and then getting a boring car. Studio Series Core Class Wheelie. The core class figures aren't really numbered, nor do they count, which kind of sucks. But I'm okay with this as well because we're missing tapes for Blaster, and I think some others are going to come out with a Perceptor re-release since core class got axed. The Wheelie that comes with Grimlock isn't that good, and the core class Wheelie also isn't that much of an improvement, but it's probably the best Wheelie that exists if you have ever seen, or in my case, owned Wheelie. Oddly enough, I completely forgot I had the original figure, nor did I even mention him in the beginning of this video. It's because he's one of the most forgettable characters from the movie, unfortunately. I'm not ever really expecting redemption for Wheelie, nor do I have a burning desire for this to be an important figure, but with Studio Series 86 Bumblebee getting re-engineered to be a non-parts forming mini-bot, I feel they can finally do some justice to Cliffjumper, who is already a phenomenal figure. They can make a non-dead Windcharger, and they can make a Bumblebee-sized Wheelie with some decent engineering. I digressed. We have 2 bots left for this video, so if you actually watched this all the way through up to this point, I appreciate you for coming on this journey with me. I really can't say that I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the last 2, so without further delay, Studio Series 86-16 Deluxe Class Arcee. Remember earlier when I told you I'm just a dude with money who's buying figures and trying to complete a collection? As I understand it, Arcee's toy wasn't even a thing. According to tfwiki.net, Ron Friedman had to fight for Arcee's inclusion in the Transformers movie because his daughter was a fan. You see, because it's the 80s and boys don't want to buy girl toys and vice versa. Again, things you will appreciate as you get older. Being able to think for yourself and have an open mind, and I'll leave it at that. Did I really have a point? Not really, other than I have no idea what the rating scale means for Transformers toys, nor do I really care. People tend to spend a lot of time complaining on the internet about things available for them to buy, and about things that they have purchased, like I did with my $110 worth of Springer figures. I just have to reiterate, y'all are spoiled. Oh my god, it's a deluxe class for $60. I'm getting robbed. Oh my god, it's a leader class and it doesn't tuck me in at night. Wah wah, cry cry. Imagine watching this movie and the only figures I owned from it were Ultra Magnus, Galvatron, Rodimus Prime, and Wheelie. And if you know what collecting Transformers is like now, pre-orders, mail orders, online shopping, dry shelves at Target, then imagine a Transformers movie that essentially bombed in theaters, toys sold like crap and were off shelves just as fast as they were on because the release strategy was tied to who you saw in the cartoon. To take it a step further, an actual Arcee Transformers toy didn't even see store shelves until 2001, a whole 15 years after her character was introduced, and this was the toy. That said, for what it is, a female robot drawn with the male gaze, slender Coke bottle shaped, and a frail harem, with Princess Leia buns who ended up somehow making it out of trope hell into a prominent female character. Talk about progress. This figure apparently didn't sell too well, and I'll attribute that to 2 things. One, it's an extensive retool of a figure that already exists, so if somebody owned the old one, why replace it with a new one? 2, Transformers YouTubers and Reddit. I personally believe a lot of people who go online trashing figures or complaining about them don't even own them or were never going to spend the money on them in the first place and just wanted to add to a conversation pool with strangers to feel some type of interaction, to have their own opinions, which may not even be their own, validated. And to that, I'll say what my daughter would say. Bleh. This figure is flippin' cool. The articulation and its ability to balance even with this big old beetle shell on her back is great. When I was glazing Toddy Mac earlier in my video about articulation and all that stuff, this figure is all that and more. Honestly, they could have went the Bumblebee and Cliff Jumper route and just had the car piece come off and include a backpack that looks like the figure in the cartoon. That way I could have just thrown the car shell into a box with the rest of the accessories I could care less about. I mean, again, I'm not trying to fall into the trope of negativity that surrounds any fandom, but if your opinions align with the people who trash actual Transformers and now their whole personality is collecting and reviewing non-transforming Transformers, you need to take a step back, open your wallet, put your money where your fingers hit a keyboard. No Arcee slander will be tolerated on this channel whatsoever, period. Alright, I've saved my favorite for last. Studio Series 86-04 Voyager Class Hot Rod. Before you start firing up your fingers and try to convince me that Hot Rod is what made Transformers suck because he got Optimus Prime killed, I will simply state, I do not care. You got your typical class clown who is a hothead trying to come up in the ranks. The kind of guy that grows up to be a security guard because he wanted to be funny in high school. That's Hot Rod.
We top flight security of the world, Craig!
Head in the clouds, doesn't take anything too serious, and realizes that comes with consequences. He idolizes Optimus Prime and probably daydreams of being him, but is too wrapped up in himself and a whole lot of nothing to ever picture it happening. So he's just living his life to the fullest. He's got an original awesome alt mode, a big personality, and he's proof that even if you don't see greatness in yourself or where you're at in your life currently, it doesn't mean that great things can't happen for you given the opportunity to prove yourself when the time comes. This figure is the fourth from the first wave of the Studio Series figures, and again, I know nothing of scaling, Leader, Voyager, Deluxe, etc. I just see figures as money leaving my wallet. A perfect example is Grimlock. He is supposedly a Leader class figure, which means his retail price is somewhere around $54. Or in my case, because I've never seen one on a shelf, he was $140.35 for me January 13th, 2023, and shipped from Robo Toy Base, brand new in box from China. So believe me when I say I was ecstatic that I randomly found a Hot Rod for retail $35 in a Walmart I went into to buy snacks. I can see why a lot of reviewers complain about why they're not getting this and that or what they're not getting with their figures for their money. This is a very cartoon accurate figure. His transformation is damn near screen accurate because I'm flipping parts unnecessarily 180 degrees all over the place to make him a car from a robot. He's got a little blue visor that showed up for a few seconds in the movie. Not sure why they didn't take advantage of this for Arcee and do the same for her as well. Blast effects, handsaw, 2 blasters, matrix of leadership, which comes with a "you got the touch" blue rubbery blast effect that is almost impossible to keep on if his hands are attached to it, and his right hand flips around and reveals a multi-tool. I was unsure of buying this figure originally, and the reason for that was the second figure in my collection was Generations Power of the Primes, Leader Evolution Rodimus Prime, who can change into Hot Rod. I spent $80 on that toy, and this was back when I was barely getting my feet wet with buying toys again. I wasn't really trying to collect all of the stuff that I have now. I just wanted a few cool figures that I never had as a kid. And once I checked one figure off the list, I was like, how can I get this one? How can I get that one? Oh, they're not even out yet. Oh, they're announcing a new wave. And the next thing you know, I pissed away close to $5,000 buying toys instead of getting my car back on the road. Another thing is, the vibe for me is totally different if I go into a store and I see a figure. I remember what it was like collecting my Rid figures, and I tell myself, this is literally the only time you will see this figure. If I don't buy it now, you'll end up paying more for it if you want it later. And sure enough, after I got Studio Series 86 Hot Rod, he jumped up to $130. Honestly, sometimes I feel really bad when I see these toys on the shelves, and I know some fans are not in the financial position I am in, and I tell myself to grab an extra one or two to sell on eBay for what I paid for it just so another fan can have it in their hands. But the people who would probably buy it are the ones like the guy I got my Blue Streak and Cliff Jumper from at TFCon, just buying Ross and TJ Maxx overstock, and sells the toys for almost double or triple the price he paid to flip a profit. It's super lame, but it's just how things are, unfortunately. But anyway, I was never the biggest fan of Rodimus Prime.
Well, you're not helping anyone by standing here talking.
It's just who Hot Rod became because that's what they thought would be the new norm moving forward with the merch launch. Everyone would be running in droves to buy Hot Rod and Rodimus Prime toys. And to that, I'll say I have never seen a Hot Rod G1 figure in my life. I've seen pictures on the internet, of course, but we're purely talking about when I was collecting Transformer toys back in 86, 92, I had a Rodimus Prime, and I was okay with that because I wasn't the one who had the buying power when I was 6. Rodimus Prime reminded me more of myself as a teenager when your parents start giving you responsibilities for stuff around the house, like mowing the lawn, raking up leaves, cleaning up the bathroom in exchange for your parents putting a roof over your head. And you also needed to stay in line because you're not the owner of the house, you're a tenant. And now you know why the song went, I don't want to grow up because I'm a Toys R Us kid. Because being an adult is trash. You get all these responsibilities, nobody is legally required to take care of you anymore, and worst of all, you have to get a job because you need money. But you also have to pay money to the man to have a job. And the next thing you know, eggs are $9 and people would go as far as to put a celebrated self-important criminal in the White House to lower the cost of groceries. But that's not this kind of video. And that sums up Rodimus Prime. He wasn't a trash character. Life just became trash when he became a grown-up. If you didn't like Rodimus Prime as a character because he wasn't written as well as his boomer grandfather Optimus Prime, responsible for everybody while you were the abysmal to how life worked child, Transformers again was just a metaphor for kids to enjoy their childhood.
Every bit as good as Optimus Prime ever was.
Optimus Prime.
Rodimus Prime hates being in charge because it's not everything he thought it was cracked up to be. Hell, even Ultra Magnus was like, hey dog, I just want to roll with the homies and run the fade on my ops. But you may have perceived things different than I did. And that's totally cool if you have a different relationship with these characters. That's completely acceptable and I respect that. All in all, I'm grateful I'm in a position I'm in to own the figures that I do and that my wife puts up with my bullcrap. And that my oldest son sees his dad collecting toys and it lets him know that it's okay to still love things that you did as a kid, even when you grow up, because at the end of the day, our time is finite. So why not enjoy something while you're here, even if that's collecting toys? There are many others who have passed on and their nostalgia journey has ended before the life you know now existed. One of my best friends I met through Cars passed away in 2005. He would have loved the live-action Transformers movies. Another friend of mine that I also met through Cars, I ran into standing in line for the midnight premiere of Revenge of the Fallen. We were catching up. He had just got married and had a kid, and his liver cancer was in remission. He told me in that line that his cancer had come back and he didn't know how bad it was. He passed away a year later. So Transformers to some may just be about toys or reliving their childhood, but to me it was always so much more. And I think that they would have loved to see my collection if they were still here. But anyways, thank you for watching, and if you took anything away from this video other than this guy runs his mouth a lot, I'd love to hear about your collections, figures you hold dear, grails, anything of the sort, what you got into collecting, why are you still collecting, the friendships maybe you've built from collecting or any other hobby, because nothing feels better than having friends with common interests and especially making new ones due to it. And with that, that's the end of the video. Hot Rod is the shiznit. Thank you for watching.